Timeless Assassin. By author Raj_Shah_7152. Chapter 671 to 688. Chapter 671, Paranoia. Leo's Pa, Planet Vorthas, the following morning. Next morning at the Skyshard mansion, as daylight broached through the curtains in Amanda's room, the duo finally woke up amidst tangled sheets that lay in ruin after a night of intense passion. Amanda's head rested on Leo's chest, her hair wild, her breath soft and uneven, as the faint smile on her lips betrayed just how thoroughly the night had claimed her. Shift. Amanda stirred, groaning softly as she tried to sit up, only to freeze when her body refused to obey. Her legs trembled uselessly beneath the blanket, her voice breaking into a half-whine, half-laugh. Leo. I don't think I can walk. My legs are done for. Leo chuckled, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Well, I did warn you I'd show you what a transcendent stamina felt like. Looks like you underestimated me. Amanda pouted, smacking his chest weakly. You brute. What am I supposed to do now? I need to finish the adjustments on the mana heart today. Carry me, princess style. Right now. Leo's grin widened at her commanding tone, and without hesitation, he swept her up into his arms, cradling her against his chest as though she weighed nothing. Amanda gasped, clutching his shoulders, her face buried against him to hide the blush spreading across her cheeks. You're impossible, she muttered, though her voice softened with affection as he carried her toward her work desk, each step steady and unhurried, as though he liked delaying the journey on purpose. So, I'm pleased to report that I finally made a working mana heart that's not the size of a fridge anymore. It's more like the size of a TV, Amanda said, as she showed off her creation to Leo, which looked like a computer-sized black box with whirring motors and several filter sheets inside. On the plus side, this unit can detoxify an area the size of a room for about a month of any and all impure mana. But on the bad side, it's still too big and heavy to be worn around the neck. Amanda said, as she began tinkering with the device and making some small adjustments to its output. Leo mused as he studied the device and its internal mana flow, sensing how the device was pulling mana from its surroundings and pushing it through the filters, before finally releasing it back into the air as purified mana. That's terrific, babe. I'm very proud of you, Leo said as he leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss against the top of Amanda's head, as he acknowledged her progress as a terrific blacksmith. However, Amanda only puffed her cheeks, her lips forming a pout as she twisted in his lap to glare at him. No, it's not terrific. I'm at my wit's end here, Leo. I don't know how I can make it any smaller than this. I've literally thought about every element known to the universe, and nothing, absolutely nothing, compresses this design to the size of an amulet. Her voice cracked between frustration and exhaustion, her fingers drumming on the black box as though hoping it might suddenly shrink on command. Leo mulled over her words in silence for a long moment, his gaze tracing the whirring filters and faintly glowing inscriptions inside. Then, with a thoughtful hum, he finally said, You know, there is a guy the first know on Tithia. Supposedly the cult's best blacksmith. If you want to consult him, I could perhaps make an introduction. He offered, as Amanda's eyes lit up instantly, her exhaustion forgotten as she practically bounced in place despite her limp legs. Oh my God, yes. I've been wanting to visit the forges of Tithia for a while now. Please, take me there. She begged as Leo smirked at her sudden burst of energy and nodded, filing it away in his mind as a promise. All right, later today, I'll take you. He agreed, as his gaze returned to the device, the faint thrum of mana filling the silence between them. Yeah, also I need this artifact mass-produced as soon as possible. If we can install these across the cult, we'll massively improve the quality of warriors under our banner. And more importantly, his hand brushed the black box, eyes narrowing as his voice dropped into something heavier. It can be our ace card for a rainy day. Should that time ever come. The ominous weight of his words hung in the air, as Amanda's excitement softened into quiet curiosity. Leo always talked about this device like it was something extremely important, however, he never explained to her as to why he felt that way. What rainy day? Why is this device so important to you? She asked at last, as Leo let out a deep sigh and pinched the bridge of his nose. On one hand, he wanted to tell Amanda about why this device was so important to him. However, on the other hand, he did not want to burden her with his paranoid fears that may never come to pass, and hence, in the end he decided to give her a mild version of the true reason of why he wanted to do this. It's to help me sleep better. With this device, there's a place in the universe that we can safely run back to, where no one can track us or try to kill us. So just in case the cult ever falls, or they turn against me, there's still a place in this wretched universe where I can keep you safe. Leo said, as he tried to force a smile after those gloomy words, but failed to put on a convincing one. Oh, you poor thing, Amanda said as she noticed his poor attempt to hide his true fears, as she gave him a reassuring hug to calm him down. Don't worry. If the artifact can be made, I promise to you that I'll find a way to make it, Amanda swore, as her words made Leo light up in genuine joy. Oh, how did I get so lucky to get a girlfriend like you? He mused as Amanda giggled and blushed at his words, clearly pleased with the compliment. Chapter 672, Amanda meets Argo. Planet Tithia, the Forge District. The air inside the Forge District was thick with smoke, heat, and the rhythmic clang of hammers striking metal, yet to Amanda it might as well have been a festival. Her eyes sparkled with wonder, her voice brimming with excitement as she darted from one side of the bustling street to the other, tugging Leo's arm as though she might burst if she didn't share what she saw. Look, Leo, that's a mana crucible stabilizer. Oh my god, do you know how expensive those are? They're used to melt alloys that ordinary forges can't even scratch. She gushed, pointing at the massive, rune-etched cauldron glowing white-hot at its core. Before Leo could answer, she spun the other way, her gaze landing on a rack of gleaming tools that shimmered faintly with mana. And those are compression hammers. They can fold a metal's mana lattice without breaking it. Do you realize how groundbreaking that is? I've only ever read about them in texts, and they actually have them here. Her voice bubbled with enthusiasm, carrying over the noise of the forge fires, as Leo couldn't help but smile faintly as he walked beside her, listening to her pour out her all like a child seeing fireworks for the first time. But while Amanda's attention was consumed by every machine and contraption they passed, Leo noticed something else. Each blacksmith they walked by, regardless of how grimy or sweat-soaked they were, paused in their work to greet him. Some wiped their foreheads with soot-stained hands before bowing deeply. Others straightened from their anvils to murmur words of respect. Congratulations on your victory, Lord Shadow Dragon. Thank you for Nemo, my lord. Welcome home, my lord. The respect in their eyes was unflinching, their reverence quiet but genuine, as Leo accepted it with a small nod each time, his stride never faltering. Eventually, the duo reached the massive gates to Argo's private forge, which looked massive in comparison to the other forges surrounding it and emitted an incomparably stronger heat. Oh my god, that's flame from a tier 6 flame spirit or higher. How did anyone even manage to tame something like that? No wonder he's the cult's best blacksmith, Amanda whispered in awe as she and Leo stepped inside the forge, their very presence instantly disrupting the rhythm of the apprentices at work. My, what an unexpected honor to have you here, Lord Shadow Dragon. Argo's booming voice carried across the hall the moment his eyes fell on Leo, as he set aside the massive hammer in his hand, and abandoned the half-finished project on his anvil without hesitation, to greet the cult's shadow dragon with due respect. I can hardly believe you came here personally. You need only have summoned me, and I would have come to you. He said, as he strode towards Leo, stopping only a few feet short. My lord, thank you for what you achieved on Nemo. The Forge District has long suffered a deficit of high-quality mana stones, but thanks to your victory, that problem will soon be a thing of the past. He said with a bow, as immediately, Leo returned the bow with equal depth, his tone measured but sincere. And thank you, Master Argo, for the mana shields you crafted for our jets. Without them, this victory would have been impossible. Leo expressed, as the two men straightened and clasped hands firmly, the gesture carrying mutual respect. Clap. This is my girlfriend, Amanda, Leo introduced, his voice softening as he drew her forward. She's a blacksmith herself, and she's been working on a project that could use your expertise. So, if you can spare a few minutes of your time today, we'd both be grateful. Leo requested, as Argo raised an eyebrow and turned his gaze towards Amanda, who looked too slender in his opinion to be an expert blacksmith. Aye, Amanda stammered, clearly intimidated by the gaze of the much senior blacksmith before her, as she retrieved her TV-sized mana heart from within her storage ring, and presented it without a word. This device. I can't get it to be any smaller. But Leo needs me to make it the size of an amulet. She said sheepishly, as Argo picked up the mana heart device like it weighed nothing and began inspecting its engineering. First, he turned the device over in his calloused hands, his thick brows furrowing as he traced the runic inscriptions, before then prying open a panel to study the inner lattice of filters, as immediately, his sharp eyes caught the glint of copper iridium rods, aligned in a way that was anything but standard as his lips parted with surprise. Copper iridium rods, as the filters. Ingenious. That alloy is usually too unstable for sustained mana exposure. Yet you've tempered it perfectly for purification. And this power core, why did you design it with a triple split conduit instead of a singular one? Amanda blinked, startled by the directness of his question, but quickly steadied herself, her nerves dissolving into focus as she explained with clarity that belied her youthful face. Because a single conduit causes mana turbulence at higher volumes. By splitting it into 3 smaller streams, I reduced the pressure in each channel, which lowers the risk of crystal erosion. The copper iridium rods are unstable if forced to absorb all the turbulence at once, but if the flow is evenly divided, the instability cancels itself out. It's not perfect, but it stabilizes long enough to cleanse impure mana without breaking down the rods. Argo's heavy jaw slackened as he stared at her, genuinely impressed. Slowly, he set the device down with a reverence most would give a relic, before looking from Amanda to Leo. "My lord," he said, his deep voice carrying a rare note of admiration, "your wife might be one of the best inventors of our time. Most of my apprentices couldn't come up with half the reasoning she just gave, let alone build this." Amanda's cheeks turned crimson at his words, her hands fluttering nervously as she tried, and failed, to suppress a smile. Wife. "Oh, we're not married yet," she muttered under her breath, which only made Leo's lips curl into a proud smile. "Pat." He laid a hand gently on her head, ruffling her hair as if she were both brilliant and precious at once, before turning serious once more. "So, can it be done?" he asked Argo with his usual business-like cadence, as Argo scratched at his soot-stained scalp first, before then thoughtfully tugging at his beard, his gaze never leaving the device. Sigh. "Give me a few days to study this problem, Lord Shadow Dragon. Your partner may stay here in the forge with me if she wishes, and together we will refine it. But this is no ordinary trinket, this is technology critical to the cult's future if I'm not wrong, and for that reason, it cannot be worked on in the open," Argo said, as even though Leo did not explain as to why he needed this device made, he still understood the strategic importance of its creation. "I'll have to move this project into my private chambers and develop it in secret. Loose tongues could get us all in trouble if the wrong ears hear of it," he said, as his words immediately caused the apprentices around them to suddenly become busy with what they were doing, and not pay attention to this conversation. "Is it all right with you?" Leo asked Amanda, who nodded with burning resolve in her eyes. "If it helps you sleep better, then yeah, I'll stay for as long as it takes," she reassured, as Leo gave both her and Argo a firm nod. Chapter 673, Acceptance. Meanwhile, Ver's Paw, planet Tithia. While Leo spent his time with Amanda, Ver chose to unwind from the burdens of war in his own way, by indulging in new restaurants and surrendering himself to luxurious massages that loosened his weary body. It was a path entirely different from Leo's, yet one he thoroughly enjoyed, partly because such pleasures genuinely calmed his mind, and partly because of the reverence with which the cult commoners treated him no matter where he went. For wherever he stepped within their domain, he was received not merely as a guest, but as someone greater than a king, almost like he were a god. Restaurant owners wept with joy at his arrival, their hands trembling as they served him meals prepared with reverence, while masseuses competed fiercely for the honor of laying their hands upon the dragon, each of them carrying out the task with unrestrained devotion. It was a reality far removed from the days of his orphaned youth, where he longed for the faintest scrap of affection. As now, he was drenched in it wherever he turned, his every word met with admiration, his very presence enough to ignite worship in the eyes of the common folk. At first, such treatment had left him feeling awkward, as he was unable to reconcile the boy he had been with the godlike figure they now revered. Yet with nearly a year passing since he was named dragon, he had finally grown more accustomed to it, as he accepted their devotion with a steadier heart and carried himself with the grace his position demanded. I have accepted these people as my people. I can no longer claim that I am still the lone wolf that I once was. The thought echoed through Ver's mind as he leaned back against the cushioned chair of the bathhouse, steam rising around him in lazy curls, yet none of its warmth could match the fire that now burned in his chest. Once, he had been content to look after himself alone, to snatch what scraps he could from the world and to laugh bitterly at its cruelty, telling himself that no one would ever care enough to stand beside him, so why should he bother caring in return? That boy had been selfish, short-sighted, and blind to the weight of others. But that boy was now long gone. Somewhere along the line, between the battles he had fought, the children who raised wooden swords in his name and the old women who kissed his hands and blessed his path, something inside him had shifted. Their pain had become his pain. Their hunger gnawed at his own stomach. Their fear kept him awake in the quiet hours of the night. And for the first time, he realized he did not resent this tether, but that he embraced it. This cult, this fractured, blood-stained, despised thing, is mine to guide now. Their destiny is my burden, their survival my duty. And if I must stain my hands black with sins untold to drag them toward greatness, then I'll do that too. He exhaled slowly, his reflection wavering across the water's surface like a stranger's face, though he knew it was not a stranger at all. Unbeknownst to him, somewhere in the endless pretending, in the constant demand to wear the mantle of dragon, he had ceased merely playing the role. He had become the dragon, the cult's savior, and there was no turning back anymore. Meanwhile on the Eternal Garden, Calith's POV. Are you certain Morris has not discovered that you are actually a demigod and not merely a monarch? Calith asked, his voice carrying an edge of anger that made the air inside the Eternal Garden feel heavier than usual. Shake, shake. Raymond shook his head firmly, his confidence unwavering. He cannot have known. And even if he suspects it, I'm certain that he holds no proof. My demigod aura is undetectable. If even you cannot sense it, Father, then no one can. I have complete faith that it is hidden. Raymond claimed, as Calith's eyes narrowed, his expression souring at the boy's certainty, his disappointment plain for Raymond to see. Child, do you grasp the consequences if Morris or Helmuth were to uncover what you are? At best, they would kill you outright. At worst, they would demand that I do it with my own hands. For that was the pact the three of us swore upon, years ago. Calith said, as the words sank like lead into Raymond's chest, a shiver running through him at the mere thought of ever standing against his father in combat. I am certain, Father. He cannot have discovered my secret, which makes it all the more troubling that he wishes to meet me in private. Nothing good can possibly come of such an invitation from Morris the Deceiver. Raymond expressed, as Calith exhaled slowly, his shoulders rising in a faint shrug of indifference, though his eyes gleamed with unease. No one knows what schemes churn within Morris's head, as at times, even I doubt if he knows what he's doing. Which is precisely why he is so dangerous. His unpredictability is his weapon, and those who try to second-guess him often find themselves already ensnared. You are right to be wary. Nothing good has ever come from a private meeting with him, so I'll say that you were wise to retreat here, to the Eternal Garden. If you want my advice, I'll say that you should stay out of sight until he occupies his mind elsewhere. As in the meantime, I will try to uncover his true reason for summoning you. Caliph advised as Raymond gave a slow nod, the weight of his father's words settling upon him. By now, he understood that this was no matter for pride or defiance, and that it was a sensitive issue that needed to be handled with patience, delicacy, and with the kind of caution that ensured survival. Chapter 674, Unexpected Visitor. The Eternal Garden, Morris's POV. Once Morris found out that Raymond had ducked his formal invitation to meet, it instantly made him even more suspicious of the young man, as he headed straight to the Eternal Garden to talk about it to Raymond's father, Caliph. Yet, to his astonishment, the instant he tried to cross the threshold of the Eternal Garden's divine realm, the domain itself rejected him. As no matter how many times he attempted to force his way through, the barrier shimmered coldly and denied him passage. Caliph, what kind of twisted jest is this? Open your gates at once, or I swear I will cut this wretched garden apart. Morris thundered, his voice ringing like a blade, though the silence that answered him only sharpened his irritation. What many did not understand about the Eternal Garden was that it wasn't simply a floating rock in the universe like planet Granada, but rather a domain skill created by Caliph himself. The Eternal Garden was a skill move. A paradise that Caliph created for himself, and hence it was solely him who controlled as to who could and could not enter the space. It was also precisely because of this reason that Morris did not believe that anyone could steal the moonshine flower from under his watch, because the entire domain was simply born out of his will, and stealing even a grain of sand from inside there was impossible unless Caliph allowed it to happen. All right, since you won't allow me entry, I'll chop this entire bloody domain down, Morris cursed, as he unsheathed his sword, when suddenly a small hole appeared in the barrier, granting him access to enter. Was that so hard? Thank you, Morris said in frustration, as he sheathed his sword and made his way in, only to be surprised when he saw both Caliph and Raymond standing side by side up there. Well, well, well. If it isn't the little rascal who ignored my personal invitation, Morris greeted, as he stuck out his tongue and began walking towards Raymond with a menacing spring in his step. Well, well, well. If it isn't the bare-chested god with no hygiene or dressing sense, that I did not invite here, but he rudely came anyway. Caliph snapped back, his voice just as thorny as the menace in Morris's step, as the two glared into each other's eyes. For a moment, neither of them backed down, as Caliph looked at Morris with fury, while Morris stared back without backing down. As for a change, he knew he was in the right here. Did you know your son avoided a personal invite from me? Is that how you have raised your children? Taught them no manners? Morris accused, as Caliph coughed in protest at the comment. Cough. Oh please, I've raised them well. I'm not an idiot, I've taught them since a young age to not trust Morris the deceiver. I say he did pretty okay to avoid your invitation. Why did you want to meet him anyways? Caliph asked, as he raised an eyebrow that made Morris chuckle a humorless laugh. You're going to play innocent even now. Boy, I thought Helmuth has the thickest skin amongst the three of us. But it's really you, isn't it? Eternal Sovereign, Morris accused, as immediately the facial expression on Caliph's face soured. Morris's attitude and the righteousness in his tone could only mean one thing. And it was the one thing he desperately wished to hide for as long as possible. My apologies, Lord Morris. It wasn't my intention to avoid your invitation. It's just that my father has instructed me to come seek his permission first before meeting other gods, so I simply came here today for the same. And guess what, he did allow me to come meet you, Raymond said, as he intervened between the two gods and tried to defuse the situation before it escalated any further. Oh, is that so? Is that why you were here, boy? Really? Morris said in a sarcastic tone, as he threw his hands up in the air as if he could not believe that this drama was still going on. What is it, Morris? If you have come here with a specific grievance, say it now. If not, please leave us alone. Like my son said, I already permitted him to come meet you in private later. So if that's all you're here for, you can leave. Caliph countered, as Morris perked up his lips and began clapping slow thunderous claps. Clap. Dot. 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 Clap. Dot. Dot. Clap. He deliberately took his time between each clap, as he tried to stir as much drama as possible, while alternating his gaze between the duo. "You got me, Caliph. For once, I truly can't tell if you're just ignorant or oversmart. But for your sake, I'm praying you're just ignorant. Because if you know that your son is a demigod, but are still trying to play innocent, then I guess there's no other option for me and Helmuth but to raise our weapons against you," Morris accused, as immediately the sun died out from above the eternal garden, plunging the entire domain in pitch-black darkness that was only broken by the rolling thunder overhead. "Thunder. Thunder sounds. What nonsense are you spouting, Morris? My son is not a demigod, he's just a monarch, so unless you have concrete proof of his ascendance, I'd suggest you remove yourself from my domain right now. Or we will have a war between ourselves today," Caliph threatened, as he retrieved the origin metal daggers from his soul space and grabbed them tight in his palms. "You're a literal master of war yourself, Caliph, whether your son is a demigod or not. You only have to ask to confirm, for if he lies, his aura will turn black. Yet, if you're too proud to do that, then I'm not going to be bullied around either. If you want war, you've got war," Morris replied, as he unsheathed his own sword and held it in his left hand, before retrieving the unrefined slab of origin metal and holding it in his right, as he reminded Caliph that he was no longer the only god in the universe with an origin metal object in his possession. Chapter 675, Exposed. Kaboom! Another streak of thunder split the heavens, its glare momentarily lighting the eternal garden as Caliph and Morris stood locked in their standoff, neither willing to yield so much as an inch. Gulp. Raymond swallowed hard, his throat dry as he stood beside his father, mortified at what might unfold next. "I was going to disappear to some obscure planet and lie low for a few years until Morris's temper cooled, but no. The lunatic just had to come barging in here today before I even had the chance to run." He cursed bitterly, unable to believe that his luck could be so cursed. Had Morris arrived even a few hours later, he would already have been gone from the eternal garden, far from this suffocating confrontation. But now, escape seemed impossible. Yet even as he blamed fate for trapping him here, a sharper unease gnawed at him, an unease that made him wonder as to why Morris suspected him at all. He could have sworn no one in the universe knew his secret. He had never once boasted about being a demigod, never even whispered about it to his wife. His aura concealment was flawless, impenetrable, refined to the point even Caliph could not sense his true tier. And he had been careful, painstakingly careful to never cross blades with another demigod, so that he never drew attention to the power he concealed. So how in all the stars had Morris sniffed out the truth? "What do I do now? Do I make a run for it? Do I stand? Will father take my side? Or will he strike me down himself?" Raymond wondered, as suddenly he saw 1,000 golden threads of fate entangling right before him. Glow. The threads of fate that started from him, connected Morris and Caliph too, all in one big chapter of destiny, as what they chose to do from here, could literally shape the future of the universe. "If I run, I'll look guilty. If I don't run, I might get killed. What do I even do here?" Raymond wondered helplessly, as he realized that despite being a demigod, he was powerless in the presence of ancient powerhouses like his father and Morris. "Is it true, boy? Are you a demigod?" Caliph asked at last, as another streak of lightning illuminated the sky, briefly casting purple light across their faces. Kaboom! Raymond gulped hard again, his face extremely nervous, while Morris shifted his gaze from Caliph to Raymond, his pointed teeth bare like that of a primal predator. "Don't you dare lie, boy. I will consider sparing your life if you tell the truth, but if you lie, I swear I'll kill you right here and now," Morris pressured, as Raymond began to feel his heart pounding out of his chest. Throb, throb. Sweat began to roll down his forehead, as he realized that this was easily the most tense situation he had been in his entire life. "What do I do here? Do I believe in my father's love for me and trust him to protect me even if I lie? Or do I believe in the deceiver's promise and tell the truth, hoping that he will spare me if I do?" Raymond wondered, as the seconds continued to tick by without any of them moving a muscle. In Raymond's head, he was busy weighing the pros and cons of both situations. However, in Morris's head, This was the final proof he needed to make sure that Raymond was indeed a demigod, for if he were not, he would not have hesitated this long to answer. Coming here, he still had a margin for error in his speculation, as he had no proof of Raymond being a demigod except his speculation. However, the longer Raymond took to answer, the more confident he got of his hypothesis. Give it up, boy, spill the truth. The fact that it took you this long to answer already tells me you're guilty. So just come clean, and I swear with Caliph before me as my witness, that I won't kill you and won't report this matter to Helmuth. Morris said, as once again he pressured Raymond to admit the truth. What do I do here, father? Please, just please give me a hint. Raymond pleaded, his eyes flicking desperately toward his father's face, as he hoped against all odds for even the faintest hint, the smallest sign of which path to take. Yet, much to his dismay, Caliph's expression remained stone cold, as though carved from marble that neither storm nor plea could ever move. Despite being his father by blood, Caliph had always made it clear that if the day ever came when Raymond's identity as a demigod was exposed, that he would not intervene, for the pact with Helmuth and Morris bound him tighter than any filial tie ever could. And today, it was precisely because of such past statements made by Caliph, that Raymond had no faith in his father to take his side should things really go wrong. Hence, even though every nerve in his body screamed against it, even though his pride held that yielding meant shackling himself to Morris forever, he decided, however reluctantly, that it was safer to trust the deceiver's offer of mercy than pray for his father's protection. Throb, throb. His heart pounded so violently it drowned out the thunder overhead, sweat dripping down his temple as his lips parted but no sound escaped. Is this truly the end of my life as a free man? Will Morris lie and expose me to Helmuth anyways? Will they leverage me as a pawn and blackmail my father? No, no, I cannot think of that now. I must survive this moment first, and pray that the rest can be solved with time. Gulp. He swallowed hard, his voice catching in his throat before finally forcing itself out, rugged and unsteady. Yes, it is true. I am a demigod, he admitted, as immediately, the temperature inside the eternal garden dropped below the freezing point. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author Raj_Shaw_7152 by link in description. Chapter 676, Morris's True Intentions. Yes, it is true. I am a demigod. Raymond admitted at last, as in that instant the temperature within the eternal garden plunged to a bone-biting chill. Kaboom! Thunder split the heavens, and for a heartbeat it felt as though time itself froze, for Raymond's eyes caught the faint glimmer of lightning crawling across the polished edge of Caliph's origin metal blade, as his own father turned his weapon against him. Duck! Instinct seized him, his muscles coiling as he threw his body downward, hoping to slip beneath the first strike. And for a moment, it seemed like he could potentially succeed, the dagger's arc whispering just above his head. However, unfortunately for him, Caliph was no ordinary opponent. The Eternal Sovereign had seemingly already accounted for his son's reflex as he threw the first dagger high on purpose as bait for the duck, while the real blow came via a second strike that was sweeping low. A move that left Raymond with nowhere to dodge. So this is it, huh? I'm going to be decapitated today by my own father. Raymond thought, as he had pure terror written in his eyes as Caliph's blade approached him. Clang! Block! Internally, Raymond had already accepted death the second he saw that second blade come for his throat. Yet, to his disbelief, the blow never landed, for Morris the deceiver moved in that very instant, sliding the raw slab of origin metal into the narrow space between Raymond's throat and the glistening dagger, as sparks erupted violently into the frozen air while the eternal garden quaked under the clash of godly force. Tremble! Boom! Raymond's breath got caught in his throat as his mind reeled, for while Caliph's blade pressed with the weight of wrath, it was Morris's strength that held it back, the deceiver's grin spreading wide with unholy amusement as though he savored the irony of shielding the son from his own father. Let it go, Caliph. I have use for the boy and I won't let you kill him here today. Morris said, as he flicked Raymond aside, and stepped before Caliph to fight him toe-to-toe. I can't spare him, Morris. You know of our ancient pact, any offspring of ours that reach the demigod realm must be killed by their own fathers. Caliph spoke without emotion, as Morris scoffed at his words. Great acting, eternal sovereign, but you can stop now. I know it's impossible for anyone to steal the moonshine flower from the eternal garden without you finding out. So I know you allowed him to be a demigod yourself. Of course I can never prove it. But I know it happened. And I don't mind. Like I already said, I have a use for the boy. Morris said, as he pushed back against Caliph and created a moment of separation between the two of them. I'm not planning to snitch about this to Helmuth if I have my way. So if you want to be known as both a father and son killer by the universe, go right ahead and kill your own son. But if not, let me put him to better use. Morris pleaded, as he stepped aside, granting Caliph access to kill his son if that was what he really wanted. However, just like he expected, Caliph did not take the bait to attack. So, what do you want him for? Caliph asked instead, as Morris covered his face and pulled at his eyes. What do I want him for? Morris repeated, his grin widening as though each word tasted of mischief and blood. What I want him to do is attack the cult and lure fucking Soren out of his hiding shell, so we can see with our own eyes whether your brother is still the same powerhouse we fought 2200 years ago, or whether he's a washed-up has-been. Morris expressed, as he began pacing a slow circle, his shadow cutting sharp angles across the frozen grass as thunder rolled above like distant drums. You understand me, Caliph, he continued, speaking while his palms flexed around the raw slab of origin metal as though it were a puppet he could make dance. I don't want you to kill him here, I want a performance. I want a mega conflict that drags Soren from whatever hole he's buried himself in, and force him to fight. The cult has no fighter stronger than a monarch, so if we kill the cult's few monarchs, Soren will be forced to come out himself. He leaned forward, his eyes bright and hungry as a predator. The cuts on his body are serious, Caliph, and he's fought his injuries for 2,200 years now. Do you know how long that is? That's over 2 fucking millennia. And do you know what happens over such a long time? Men age, wounds fester and vigor drains even from gods who refuse to die. I suspect he has lost tendon and temper both, but suspicion is not proof. So what I want is proof of Soren's current strength. Morris demanded, as he began to chuckle, slowly at first, but soon maniacally and non-stop. Let your son be our test dummy, Caliph. For if he dies, we honor him in his memory. We paint him as the new face of our anti-cult campaign. While if he prevails, we grant him life. We allow him to live freely as a demigod, for the contribution he made to society by killing Soren is too great to go unrewarded. So what do you say? Is my plan glorious? Or is it just marvelous? Morris asked, as he tugged at his eyelids hard before beginning to laugh even louder, as his voice eclipsed even the sound of thunder in the surroundings, the entire eternal garden trembling beneath his aura. What a vile and disgusting man, Caliph thought, as internally he did not feel even the least bit amused by Morris's plan. However, no matter how much he hated it, realistically, he had no other option but to agree with it, since his son had already so foolishly admitted to being a demigod. Chapter 677, Return to Juxta. Planet Juxta, Leo's POV. After leaving Amanda in Argo's care at the Forge on Tithia, Leo turned his course toward Juxta, answering Commander Charles's request for a visit once he had the time. Oh man, I can't believe how badly Juxta's been scarred after the last incursion, Leo muttered, his eyes narrowing as the world below came into view. From above, the military base resembled little more than a broken carcass, its once proud walls fractured and charred, the sprawling compounds pockmarked with craters, as though the very earth had been chewed and spat out by war. Step, step. As Leo descended onto the cracked landing platform, the acrid scent of ash and steel hit him first, momentarily making him feel as if he were back on Nemo, since this was the exact environment he had left behind. Push. Pull that up, nice and easy. All around him, soldiers moved about with tired discipline, as they helped the engineers rebuild what they could, their faces marked by fatigue yet hardened by resolve. And there, seated calmly on a splintered bench just outside the ruined command post, was Charles. A thin ribbon of smoke rising from the cigarette clasped between his fingers, as he indifferently gazed at the destruction surrounding him. "Boy, it's good to see you here," he said as soon as their eyes met, as his lips tugged into a faint smile. "You look well. Has your realm stabilized since I last saw you?" he asked, as he extended his hand for a shake, which Leo took in an instant. Clasp. The two gripped each other hard, Leo's strength still a far cry from that of Charles's, as it was him who Winston backed away first. "Yeah, my realm's stable now. I'm ready to kick your ass in sparring," Leo replied, his words carrying a spark of defiance, as Charles burst out into a hearty laugh, smoke spilling from his lips. "You're in over your head if you think you can take me, boy. Like I said, it'll be a couple more centuries before you can stand toe-to-toe with me," Charles mocked, as Leo only stared back, his eyes firm, as if daring Charles to remember everything he had already done to defy expectations, as his spunky response made Charles smile in satisfaction. "Take a walk with me, boy. I feel like you're finally mature enough for me to share some realities of war with you," Charles said at last, as he rose from the bench and brushed off ash from his sleeve before gesturing toward the quiet end of the military base. "All right," Leo replied, giving him a faint nod, as he fell into step beside the commander, the two of them moving away from the noise of the repair crews. "The situation on Juxta is not as good as I had hoped, even though we won this war," Charles began, his tone carrying a quiet gravity, as Leo raised an eyebrow in surprise at those words, waiting for him to continue. "The planetary barrier on Juxta had remained unbroken for more than 4 centuries, Charles explained, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed across the ruined compounds. "The last time it was breached, I was still a Legion commander serving under Commander Jerome, who lost his life in that very battle while defending this world. Since that day, we have never faced such a coordinated assault, and as a result, the men are shaken. If before, they may have thought of this posting as merely dangerous, I think they now believe it to be suicidal, as the notion that the barrier would hold no matter what has been shattered. I think they finally understand now, as to what it means to be soldiers when the technological defenses collapse and when the enemy surges through the breach." His voice deepened as he went on, and it shows in their demeanor, for even though courage remains, it has been mixed with a fear that does not fade, and courage mixed with fear is brittle. If before they slept peacefully at night, they now whisper more, as sleep eludes them. They think about their wives and children, they worry for the lives they swore to protect, and the weight of that worry bends them even if they try not to show it. Leo nodded quietly, as he understood it was only natural for such scars to form, since no man could face such horrors of war and emerge untouched. "The enemy monarchs personally slaughtered the men at 2 forward bases," Charles continued, his jaw hardening as his eyes dimmed into shadow, "and the corpses there were left in such vile conditions that the sight alone is unbearable, even for someone like me, who has seen the battlefield for more than half a millennia. Of course I avenged them. I hunted those monarchs down, and I claimed their lives in return." He paused, drawing in a slow breath as the smoke from his cigarette curled upward into the bruised sky, before adding with a weight that seemed to drag the words down into the earth itself, "although that, unfortunately, was all I could do." Leo remained silent at first, his brows furrowing at Charles's confession, for on the surface it sounded final, almost righteous, yet the more he turned it over in his mind the less it felt like closure. Avenging the dead was a soldier's duty, yes, but was one life ever equal to another? If some nameless hand murdered Amanda tomorrow, would the death of that murderer feel like enough for me? The thought struck him cold, and as he lingered on it, he realized that the answer could only be no. Revenge would never be balance, it would never fill the empty chair, or warm the bed gone cold. At best it was the bare minimum, the instinctive lash of pain striking back at pain. True healing, Leo thought, was not carved in blood but in the long, merciless road that followed, as scars had to be endured, memories had to be born, and the living had to learn how to move forward without forgetting. And perhaps that was the hardest truth of all. that the blade could end a life, but it could never restore what was taken. Chapter 678, Why There Are So Few Demigods in the Universe. Planet Juxta, the military base, Leo's POV. Leo and Charles spoke for a long time about the scars of war and the burden of rebuilding both walls and spirits, as Charles admitted that while fortifications could be raised stone by stone, it was the breaking of confidence that left the deepest wounds, for faith once lost never returned in its original form, until finally, Leo steered the conversation toward a subject far more delicate. So, you're telling me the enemy commander called you the strongest monarch, and that for the past century your reputation in the universe has been one of an untouchable badass? Leo asked, as his question made Charles straighten his back, pride flashing in his weathered eyes as he gave a firm nod. Yeah, I'm feared plenty in the righteous faction, being second in the cult hierarchy and all, Charles said, as his words carried a weight of satisfaction that made Leo frown. So if you're the strongest monarch, and if you've carried that title for 100 years already, why are you still stuck at the monarch tier? Surely you have the talent to push beyond and ascend to the demigod stage, no? Leo pressed, confusion furrowing his brow as he struggled to reconcile Charles's fame with his apparent ceiling. I don't know if I do, boy. Maybe I lack the talent, maybe I don't. But even if I do have the right blood, I still cannot make that leap, because the cult no longer has the ingredients to craft the demigod breakthrough potion, Charles admitted, as Leo stared at him blankly, his expression stupefied. Since you're looking at me like you've never heard a word of this before, let me educate you on what it really takes to break through to demigod. First and foremost, you need the genetics required to even qualify for demigod ascension. Most monarchs don't have them. For unless your bloodline ties back to the old divine gods, it's almost impossible to have such genetics. Dupravel, for example, is a fine warrior and a capable monarch, but he will never ascend. His bloodline isn't strong enough, so he will never reach the threshold. Charles explained as Leo nodded in understanding. This much was standard, the same rules applied to even Grand Masters and Transcendent Tier warriors. For those whose bloodline was not strong enough, never reached that stage. But talent is only one of the requirements. Let's say your parent is Soren himself, does that mean you can automatically ascend to demigod? No, because even if you do everything right, you still need one key ingredient to break through, which is the demigod breakthrough potion. Charles explained, as he put up 3 fingers. To make that potion, you need 3 key ingredients amongst other rare materials, namely, water from Granada, soil from the pit and moonshine flower from the eternal garden. And you already know who controls those 3 planets. Charles implied, as Morris, Helmuth, and Caliph. Leo answered quietly, the names heavy on his tongue. Exactly. Those 3 keep an ironclad grip on these resources, and by doing so, they prevent the rise of any new gods. Since if no one ever becomes a demigod, they can never even hope of becoming a god. And that's precisely how they prevent the universal order from shifting even slightly. Charles explained, as only now did Leo grasp the scale of the power play that governed the universe, his stomach tightening with disgust as he thought of the deliberate cruelty of preventing anyone from reaching the pinnacle of power. Though secretly he could not help but also admire its cold brilliance. The cult had several demigods 2,200 years ago, but they were all killed by the Righteous Alliance in the years that followed, while none of our dragons or monarchs ever made it past this tier, because we could never get our hands on the potion. Today, I suffer the same problem myself. I may stand at the peak of monarch tier, but without that potion, I will never ascend, Charles said heavily, as his admission sank into Leo like ice. But I do not regret it either, boy. 70% of those who attempt promotion die in the process. The breakthrough is never guaranteed. You need mastery over aura and intent just to survive the attempt, and that alone defeats most monarchs before they even try. In the end, when all is said and done, perhaps 1 in 100,000 monarchs ascends, with only 4 reaching the demigod stage in the last 2 millennia. Charles's words fell like stones into silence, and Leo found himself unable to speak for a moment, the statistic alone shocking him more than any battlefield had ever done. So, is all my struggle right now pointless? So what you're telling me is that even if I somehow go past the transcendent tier and monarch tier, I'll still never be able to become a demigod? Leo asked, his voice laced with frustration, as Charles simply shrugged his shoulders before patting Leo's head. You're still a long way from getting there, boy, and I have faith that you'll figure out a way to make this work eventually. Charles said, as he encouraged Leo to not think too much about things beyond his control and to focus on the present moment for now. Sigh. Leo exhaled slowly, as he let Charles's words settle in his chest, though his mind still churned restlessly with questions of future battles and impossible thresholds. For a moment he studied Charles, the veteran who had struggled with this barrier for over a century now, as he realized that perhaps Charles had already spent a decent chunk of his life worrying about the same, which was why he was asking him to not think about it for now. As while the problem was a complex one, focusing on it too much too early could dampen his progress as a warrior even before he hit that ceiling. Chapter 679, Cancer to Cult. Planet Vorthas, the next day, Leo's POV. The final stop on Leo's reunion trail before he reported for skill training with the First Elder was Vorthas, where he sought out Chaosbringer to hear an update on his side of affairs. By now, Chaosbringer had truly settled into the role of the newly promoted Seventh Elder, wearing the title as though it had always been his, for he had not only integrated seamlessly with the former Elder's staff and loyalists but had bent them to his rhythm in such a way that none suspected the truth. The transition, though sudden, was flawless, and the shadow of the previous man had already been erased. Thus, when Leo entered the Elder's office on Vorthas, it was the same attendants and secretaries who once served the old 12th Elder that bowed and greeted him, yet the atmosphere that filled the room felt utterly transformed. The weight of stale formality that used to hang in this place was gone, replaced by a vibrant pulse of energy, sharp efficiency mixed with an almost theatrical flair, as though the very air itself now reflected the deeper and more hidden traits of its new master. Lord Shadow Dragon, please take a seat, Chaosbringer said, his voice entirely composed, as he gestured for Leo to sit, before gesturing for his assistant to close the door, as he did not greet Leo in an over-friendly way in front of the staff member. Click. However, once the door closed and the two of them were completely alone, the alias dropped in an instant, as he slammed his own head on the desk and said, Lord Boss, your humble servant greets you. Please forgive my previous insolence. I would never treat you with such coldness if I could help it. Please feel free to punish me however you see fit, if I have offended you even slightly. Chaosbringer said, as Leo chuckled and tapped on his shoulder to get up. Get up, Chaosbringer, you know I don't mind such petty things. So get up, and start reporting your findings about the council to me. Leo instructed, as Chaosbringer instantly straightened up and began reporting his discoveries. My lord, almost every elder I met inside the council is a snake. All they care about is their own popularity and their own political cause. While most of them are in fact cult loyalists as a whole, and will unify strongly against external threats. In the absence of immediate existential problems, they squabble internally like children, and don't have a grand vision for development. In my brief time with them, I have found that most of them have no idea how to make use of the cult's external information network, or how to strategically undermine the righteous faction's institutions. So I have unfortunately come to the conclusion that all elders within the council must be replaced within this decade, one at a time, until we control it all. Chaosbringer shared, as Leo raised an eyebrow at his assessment, yet agreed with it completely. I have taken the liberty to use the funding I get as the seventh elder to start forming an information network of my own, as I have reached out to my contacts in the uprising, and have reassigned most guild members to penetrate righteous faction institutions as sleeper agents. I have also taken the liberty to call some of them here, as I plan to plant them as staff members in various offices of elders, giving them time to observe and mimic their behavior, before eventually teaching them shape-shift so that they are ready to replace the elders they served. It's a decade-long plan, but eventually, I will have the entire council under my control. Chaosbringer shared, as Leo nodded in approval at his words. This was precisely why he had called over Chaosbringer to the cult, because he knew that the man was capable of producing such results. Finally, my lord, I have some disturbing news. Chaosbringer began, as his voice dropped to a slightly worried tone. My lord, although I don't have concrete proof of it, I strongly suspect that it was the third elder who betrayed the previous dragon Noah Ashburn and gave away his location to the righteous faction. I have met the man twice, and I have found him to be a yes man of sorts, with no obvious individual voice and no display of political ambition. He agrees easily to whatever the others in the room say, and does not appear to take himself too seriously. Yet, despite having such a weak personality, he's holding on to one of the strongest elder seats within the cult for over a century now, and his constituents are reportedly very happy with him as well. Something in my gut tells me that the man is a red flag, and that he cannot be trusted. For in my experience of dealing with cowards and traitors, they all display traits similar to the third elder. Chaosbringer alleged, as Leo took his instincts very seriously. Since Chaosbringer was not the type of man to make such allegations easily, Leo took his words at face value himself, even though he had never personally had much interaction with the third elder himself. It's my intention to replace the third elder first, for in my understanding he's the biggest threat to the cult's internal security at the moment. Followed by the first elder, who is a narcissistic bastard who can't see his spotlight taken away by anyone, and especially not the dragons. Together, the two of them hold a side of the council that's extremely toxic and outdated. And they behave like cancer cells in an otherwise vibrant cult society. So if you agree, I would like to make my short-term focus, replacing these two gentlemen. Chaosbringer requested, as Leo nodded in agreement to his words. Yes, you have my blessing for this. You can proceed any way you see fit. And if at any point, you need either of them assassinated, consider me as a happy candidate to finish the job. Leo said, as he gave a green light for the whole operation. Chapter 680, Sixth Sense. Planet Tithia, Leo's POV. After concluding his meeting with Chaosbringer, Leo headed straight to Tithia, since that was where he was supposed to report for his next round of skill training, this time directly under the First Elder. So far, he had learnt the skills from 12th, 11th, 10th, 9th, 4th and 2nd Elders. With the First Elder's skill being the 7th of the group. I wonder what the First Elder is going to teach us. I hope it's a cool skill considering his seniority. Leo hoped, as he reported at the Tithia training grounds, where Ver was already waiting for his arrival. Hey, yo, cuz. What's up? Ver said, as he dapped up Leo and sized him up with a smile, looking completely rejuvenated compared to when he was just back from the war. Step. The First Elder arrived not long after, his white robes trailing behind him as he walked with a slow deliberate pace, his face carrying that same artificial cheer that felt less like warmth and more like the polished veneer of a politician who wanted everyone to like him. Ah, if it isn't the Shadow Dragon and the dragon himself, what a privilege it is for me to host you both here today, the First Elder greeted, his tone bright with false enthusiasm as his eyes lingered a little too long on Leo before flicking toward Ver. Leo said nothing in return, though his eyes narrowed ever so slightly as Ver gave a faint nod, and the First Elder, sensing their muted reception, carried on without pause. Today you shall be introduced to one of the cult's closest guarded secrets, a skill that has saved the lives of the dragons more times than even the strongest sword or shield ever could, as today, I'm going to teach you the unparalleled technique called the Sixth Sense. He paused, letting the name hang in the air, as though the mere mention of it was meant to inspire reverence, yet Leo only tilted his head slightly, curious but unimpressed, while Ver leaned forward with genuine interest, his eyes bright as he waited for more. The Sixth Sense, the First Elder continued, clasping his hands behind his back as he began to circle the training ground, his instinct sharpened into certainty. It is a whisper of survival that cuts through all deception and leaves no room for hesitation. In other words, it is the ultimate alert system that jolts its wielder to danger before danger ever truly arrives. He explained, before snapping his fingers sharply, as from the side an assistant hurried in with a wooden table, the surface covered with neatly arranged objects wrapped in cloth. Now watch carefully, for words cannot capture what this skill truly means. He said, as from the pile, he drew forth a heavy opaque helmet, thick enough that no light could slip through the narrow slits. This, he explained as he slid the helmet over his head, blocks all vision and sound. Once it is on, I am blind and deaf. I'm putting this on for the sake of demonstration, as the rest will be explained by my assistant. The first elder said, as he secured the helmet, his voice no longer audible now. The assistant then stepped forward once more, producing a pair of polished silver cuffs etched with binding runes, and clamped them around the first elder's wrists with a faint click, their glow confirming what Leo already sensed, that the cuffs were the mana-suppressing kind, which would ensure that the elder could not use any mana-based perception techniques. As per the first elder's instructions, Lord Dragon and Lord Shadow Dragon, you both may pick up 3 daggers each and stand 50 meters away from where he is now. Once at that distance, you may throw those daggers any time you please, with any amount of speed, and at any trajectory. However, for safety reasons, please refrain from attacking his vitals. The assistant instructed, as Leo exchanged a quick glance with Ver, who grinned with the competitive spark that always came so naturally to him. Without a word, the two of them stepped back to the measured distance, their hands closing around the dagger hilts as they readied themselves. Ready, Ver called, spinning his dagger once before flipping it to grip the blade and leave the blunt end free. Ready, Leo answered, his arm already cocked back. Whoosh! The first dagger cut through the air, followed almost instantly by the second, the twin projectiles whistling with speed as they shot toward the blindfolded elder. Yet, at the very last moment, the elder tilted his head just enough for the first dagger to whip past harmlessly, while his body twisted with fluid precision to let the second scrape nothing but air. Oh, Leo muttered, his eyes narrowing, as Ver let out a sharp whistle. They tried again, this time staggering their throws to strike from different angles, but once more the elder bent and swayed with uncanny grace, weaving between their strikes as though guided not by eyes or ears but by something deeper, something primal. Even when Leo released his final dagger with a deceptive feint, curving the throw with a flick of mana, the man still avoided it at the last instant, his movements jerky but sure, like a marionette dancing to strings only he could feel. Thud, thud. The daggers hit the ground behind him, each one harmless. As you see, the assistant said calmly, his voice echoing across the training hall, the first elder does not need sight, sound or mana to know where danger lies. The skill warns him. It tells him when harm approaches, and his body responds before thought can even catch up. Ver's eyes glittered, clearly impressed, while Leo kept his face neutral, though inside he acknowledged the value of what he had just witnessed. But the elder was not yet finished, as he jerked his palms in a predetermined motion to signal to the assistant that he may start the second act now. I will do it at once. The assistant whispered to himself as he hurried forward with a tray carrying 10 glasses of water, their surfaces trembling faintly as he set them down on the table. Thud. Setting it down, he then produced a glass vial from his sleeve that seemed to be filled with a clear liquid, that he then handed over to Leo. Lord Shadow Dragon, you may put the poison into whichever cup you like. Mix them, shift them, do whatever you wish. Make it as difficult as possible. He instructed, as Leo glanced at Ver, who shrugged with an easy grin, and together they uncorked the vial, pouring its contents into one of the cups before swapping their positions around the tray several times until neither of them could easily tell which cup held the danger anymore. Satisfied, Leo nodded, and the assistant set the tray in front of the elder, who, still blindfolded and bound, reached out and began to run his hands gently over the glasses. He paused at one, his fingers hovering just a fraction too long before pulling away. He touched the next two briefly, then circled back to the first again, as though something within him was sounding an alarm. Tap tap tap. He tapped thrice to signal his choice, as the assistant retrieved the cup and sniffed carefully before bowing low in confirmation. Correct, this is indeed the glass with poison, he confirmed, as Leo exhaled slowly, his eyes narrowing in thought, while Ver clapped his hands together with boyish excitement. Man, that's insane. He couldn't see, he couldn't hear, he couldn't use mana, and he still figured it out. Ver said, his grin wide as though he had just witnessed a miracle. Remove. At this moment, the assistant uncuffed the first elder, who then lifted the helmet free, his hair damp with sweat yet his expression triumphant, as if to remind them both that what he possessed was one of the cult's most important secrets. This is the legendary technique, Sixth Sense, he said, his tone cocky now. It is not a weapon for killing, nor a skill for boasting. It is survival distilled to its purest form, the ability to endure when all else fails. Learn it well, for without it, no dragon lives long enough to carry the weight of destiny. The first elder warned, as Leo remained quiet, his gaze steady as he absorbed the words. He could already feel how much this skill would mean for him, not only as a warrior but as a target for countless assassination attempts, as having a skill like this in his arsenal could definitely increase his odds of survival significantly. Chapter 681, Training Sixth Sense. Sixth Sense was more than just a technique that could be applied to battle. It was an all-encompassing survival skill that alerted one to any and all forms of danger, as demonstrated by the first elder's ability to know which glass was poisoned and which was not. So while Leo still had his aura mastery to rely on in combat, where he could read intent lines before an attack arrived, Sixth Sense offered a different kind of protection, one that extended beyond the battlefield. It was a safeguard that could warn him even in sleep, or in moments when his guard was lowered, making it nearly impossible for an enemy to sneak up on him, and in that sense, it was a skill as practical as it was essential. To master this skill, you must learn to sharpen your instincts beyond what is ordinary. Everyone, whether it is a newborn child or an old man at death's doorstep, possesses some form of survival instinct, yet this technique refines that primal sense to its absolute limit. But the path to learning it is anything but easy, the first elder continued, a smirk of pride tugging at his lips. The reason why only the cult can pass down this technique is because only our alchemists know the secret behind brewing the potion we call the instinct-enhancing potion. Once consumed, it forces your survival instincts into overdrive, pushing them to their peak by subjecting you to an episode of extreme paranoia and mental strain, convincing your very mind that danger lurks around every corner, tricking you into believing that death itself is breathing down your neck. Of course, you will not actually be in danger, but your goal will be to confront those illusions head-on, conquering the fear while holding on to the benefits of that state, whether it be sensing which vial is poisoned, or predicting the direction of an attack before it ever comes. Throughout this process, you may hallucinate, you may lose your grip on reality altogether, and there will be times where you cannot tell the difference between real and false threats. Yet if you endure, if you persevere under my guidance, you will come to master it, and in time, Sixth Sense will settle into you as a passive skill, one that will never leave you, no matter the battlefield. The first elder declared, as Leo and Ver exchanged a nervous glance, each of them silently weighing the price of what was to come. Now then, before we begin, there is a matter of preparation, the first elder said, his voice dropping to a calmer yet far more serious note, as he snapped his fingers toward his assistant. Clink, clink. From a small lacquered chest, the assistant retrieved 2 pairs of silver handcuffs, their surface covered with dense runes that pulsed faintly with a dull violet glow. These, the first elder continued, stepping forward as though savoring the tension that now hung in the training arena, are the cult's strongest power-restricting cuffs. Once you put them on, you will be unable to channel mana or strength beyond the most basic level. Your bodies will still function, your muscles will still move, but you will be reduced to no different than an amateur tier man. He paused, allowing the words to sink in, as his eyes shifted between Leo and Ver as if mocking their hard-acquired strength over the years. You see, true instinct is not sharpened when you can lean on your power. It must be stripped bare, tested raw, and only when your strength is shackled will your mind and spirit be forced to sharpen their edge. Otherwise, you will never learn to distinguish instinct from the noise of your own abilities. He justified, as Ver gulped a mouthful of saliva. Cuffs, huh? He muttered, his usual grin dimming into something more subdued, though he reached for the pair without complaint, with Leo following suit as well. Good, the first elder said, satisfaction lacing his tone as he gestured for the assistant to bring forth the next items. 2 crystal vials were placed before them, each filled with a shimmering orange liquid that looked no different from mango juice. However, as soon as the assistant uncorked them, the faintest whiff of the concoction made Leo's stomach tighten, the scent sharp yet oddly sweet, enough to make him wary before even lifting it. "This is the instinct-enhancing potion," the elder said. "Once you drink it, your latent instincts will awaken, but they will do so violently. Your mind will descend into paranoia, your heart will beat as though enemies are all around you, and every shadow will feel like it carries a blade. But remember, this is an illusion. It is not real danger, yet your body will react as though it is. What you must learn is to balance on that knife's edge, embracing the sharpened awareness without losing yourself to madness." Leo exchanged one last glance with Ver, both of them silent, both of them aware that hesitation had no place here. "Bottoms up, cousin," Ver muttered as he gripped his vial and downed it in one motion. Leo followed, the liquid burning like fire as it coursed down his throat, spreading into his chest with unnatural heat. At first, nothing. Then, thump, thump, thump. His heart began to race, faster and faster, as though trying to break through his ribcage, and suddenly the arena around him no longer felt still. The walls seemed closer, the shadows darker, the flicker of torchlight twisting into movements at the edge of his vision. "There's someone behind me." The thought came unbidden, sharp as a knife, and Leo's body tensed before his reason could argue otherwise. He spun, only to find nothing there, yet the conviction that he was being watched did not fade. Across from him, Ver was already breathing hard, his hand twitching toward his side where his blade would normally rest, his eyes darting at every corner as though he expected an ambush to spring at any second. "Do not resist the paranoia," the first elder's voice cut through the haze, steady and calm. "Feel it, let it flood your senses, let your body tremble if it must, but do not drown. Focus, and ask yourself what lies beneath the fear. The truth is buried there." Step, step. The faint sound of footsteps echoed through Leo's mind, though the assistant and the elder had not moved an inch. His breathing grew shallow, his eyes locking onto the corner where the sound had come from, convinced that a blade would emerge from the darkness any moment. His instincts screamed at him, "Danger! Danger! Danger!" Yet when nothing came, when the silence held, he clenched his jaw, realizing that the potion was twisting his senses, magnifying every whisper of unease into a storm of terror. "Fuck me. Fuck." Ver let out a low curse, sweat dripping down his temple as he swayed unsteadily, his pupils dilating wide as though he could see things no one else could. There's poison in the air. I can taste it. It's choking me, you dirty bastard, you want to kill me and cuz while we are hallucinating, don't you? You fucker," he said, as the first elder simply chuckled at his words, not bothering to acknowledge or deny what he felt at this moment, as he simply let him draw his own conclusions. Chapter 682, Scary Glimpse into Future. Planet Tithia, First Elder's private training arena. "Fuck, fuck, fuck, he's trying to kill us cuz, the sadistic elder is trying to kill us. He's wanted to kill me since before I became dragon, and now he's got his chance." Ver spoke, drool dripping down his chin as he swung his shackled wrists towards the first elder, who ducked to dodge the weak attack. Stagger. Stumble. Staggering and stumbling to the ground, Ver instantly rolled over to prevent himself from getting hit, as he hallucinated someone to be throwing a dagger at him, when no one really was. "Where is it? Where is the dagger you threw at me, you spineless cunt? I heard it rattle against the ground. I heard it," Ver mumbled, as he tried his best to find the imaginary dagger, but naturally failed to do so. Meanwhile, Leo stood unmoving, his face contorted, as he felt himself sucked into a ghost dream-like vision, one that felt more like a prophecy, rather than an event from the past. Screams. Fire crackling. Explosions ripping through the sky. The first vision that surged before Leo's eyes was of Juxta laid in ruin, the skies of the once vibrant planet blackened with smoke as righteous faction destroyers loomed above like vultures circling carrion, their cannons spitting endless fire in a clear violation of the universal rules of war. Boom. Boom. What are you sick freaks doing? They are innocent civilians. Leo murmured internally, as he saw the righteous faction destroyers obliterating entire civilian settlements, their goal not to conquer the planet, but to rather eradicate it of every last cult loyalist, whether they be citizen or soldier. Kaboom! Shake! Scream! The ground quaked as larger mana bombs rained down, causing entire city blocks to split apart and crumble in seconds, the entire city covered in a ceaseless chorus of screams that did not end but only grew louder as more lives were extinguished. Everywhere he looked, Leo only witnessed horror, streets littered with severed limbs, children's faces frozen in terror as the flames from mana bombs consumed them. The stench of burning flesh clawed at his nostrils, thick and suffocating, as the mangled corpses of men and women he had once walked past in the barracks or seen laughing in markets were now strewn across the charred earth like grotesque ornaments, their faith in the dragon repaid not with salvation but with utter devastation. It was not a battlefield but a graveyard painted in fire and sorrow, a vision so raw and merciless that Leo's chest tightened with the unbearable weight of it, for here there was no honor in dying, only the senseless slaughter of innocents who had believed, until their final breath, that the dragon or the shadow dragon would protect them. Before Leo could even steady his breath from the horror of the first vision, the world lurched violently, and he was thrust headlong into another, one where he found himself locked in a heated argument with Ver, their voices clashing amidst the backdrop of looming destruction. "Why don't you understand, cousin? If you stay, you will die. This is not a battle we can win, not today. You must run, we must disappear, we must bide our time in the shadows until we are strong enough to face them." The Leo in the vision cried out, his voice trembling with a desperation that spilled into his eyes, his every word carrying the raw fear of someone who had already glimpsed the certainty of death. He reached for Ver as though trying to drag him away by force, but the dragon, as stubborn as the mountains themselves, stood unmoved. "You run, cuz," Ver said firmly, his jaw set, his gaze burning with a defiance that seemed carved into his very bones. "You're the shadow dragon, you can live, you can avenge us all. But me, I'm not running, I will stay. I will fight. The dragon will not abandon the cult. I will repay their faith in me, even if it is the last thing I ever do." His words struck like iron, unbending and absolute, as he shoved Leo back with both hands, his refusal as final as a blade driven into the earth, and before Leo could resist, before he could plead further, the vision fractured around him once more, the scene shattering into something new and cruel. In his final vision, the world convulsed once more, the smoke and fire dissolving into silence as he found himself standing in a barren field where the ground was dark and cracked, with a row of graves stretching before him, each one etched with a name that tore at his chest. Here lies Amanda Skyshard. Here lies Soren. Here lies Aegon Ver. Here lies Charles. Here lies Elena Skyshard. Here lies Jacob Skyshard. Here lies Luke Skyshard. Here lies Alia Skyshard. Here lies Valiant Dumpy. The names bled together in his vision as though the universe itself was mocking him with loss, and standing at the center of it all was not the Leo of now but an older, wearier version of him, his beard outgrown with gray hair and his eyes hollow as though everything that once tethered him to life had been ripped away. Beside this elder self stood Ben Faulkner, or rather what remained of him, the robot's body twisted and mangled, wires sparking faintly where limbs had been torn apart. Yet his single functioning eye glowed faintly as he kept vigil by the graves, like the last companion of a man who had already lost everything else. And then, as the vision shivered on the edge of collapse, Ben's head turned, his gaze not on the older Leo who lingered before the graves, but on the real one watching from within the vision, his broken frame lifting slightly as though to deliver a truth that could not be denied. "In the end, you were always destined to walk alone." His voice was metallic yet heavy, final as a tolling bell, as with those words the vision snapped shut, leaving him to deal with the weight of those words in silence. Chapter 683, Wake Up to Reality. In the end you were always destined to walk alone. Those words hit Leo harder than any sword or training injury ever could, as he felt as if his very soul had been ripped out of his body. He had always known, deep down, that in the long run his talent and his ability to transcend mortal limits were more of a curse than a blessing, as while his body would remain youthful and his strength unbroken for centuries to come, those he held closest would inevitably wither and fade, their lives slipping away one by one, until at the end of it all he would be left standing alone, carrying nothing but memories that time refused to spare him from. I don't want it. I don't want immortality, I just want to be the strongest so that I can protect you all for however long you live. Leo muttered, as he snapped back to reality, and saw Ver beside him cursing the first elder for poisoning the very air the two of them breathed. Huh, is the air around me really poisoned? Leo wondered, as once that thought entered his mind, his chest suddenly tightened, as he felt like he was inhaling liquid fire. Gasp, tremble, gasping for air, Leo leaned across the table, as he felt his lungs protest against his thoughts. On one hand, the rational side of his brain told him that this was all an illusion, that there was no poison in the air. However, for some inexplicable reason, even though his mind knew that this was all a facade, his body did not comply, for his lungs refused to breathe the air around him as though he were submerged underwater. Forced breath, sharp exhale. It was in this state that the minutes dragged on, as Leo's struggle mirrored Ver's descent, both of them trapped in cages forged not of iron but of their own distorted thoughts, while the potion seeped into every corner of their minds, making the ordinary unbearable and turning shadows into knives, footsteps into death itself, and even the still air into a noose tightening around their throats. For the next half an hour they battled against themselves, Leo forcing each breath through lungs that insisted they were drowning, while Ver thrashed and spat curses at phantoms that never came, their bodies shaking as sweat poured down their temples, and their voices cracking as fear pushed them toward the brink of madness. Yet slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the fire began to ebb, the frenzy dulled into exhaustion, and the feverish rhythm of their hearts gave way to something steadier, until finally, after what felt like an eternity, the haze lifted, leaving behind two warriors slumped and panting, their eyes hollow yet clear, their sanity pieced back together though not without cost. Their rational selves had returned, but it was not because they mastered the sixth sense, but because the effects of the potion naturally wore off, allowing them to return to sanity. Their faces bore the look of men dragged through a nightmare, ragged and disoriented, as both of them silently realized that this was by far the most challenging training either of them had ever undergone. Good, the first elder said, his voice carrying the calm satisfaction of a teacher whose lesson had struck exactly as deep as intended. You did well for your first day, and I will permit you both to rest for the remainder of it, so that you can gather yourselves and regain your strength. For a fleeting second Leo almost thought he heard mercy in the man's tone, yet the illusion of kindness vanished just as quickly when the elder added. Tomorrow, we begin again and perhaps hold 2 sessions, and the day after that maybe we do 3 or 4, as we continue with this pace of training until the sixth sense takes root inside you so deeply that no hallucination, no illusion, and no threat, whether real or imagined, can ever break your instinct again, the first elder said, as his lips curved into a smile that only made the truth of their ordeal sink heavier into their hearts. Leo glanced at Ver, whose jaw clenched as though he wanted to spit a curse but lacked the strength, while Leo himself remained silent, both of them knowing that no protest would change what awaited them tomorrow, as the path forward had already been carved, and it was one they had no choice but to walk. And so the day ended not with triumph or relief but with 2 dragons left hollow and trembling, their minds scarred in ways that even war had never managed, as they were forced to wrestle with both their inner demons and their primal survival instincts at once, a battle that left no visible wounds yet cut far deeper than steel ever could. This is some grade of bullshit, cuz, I feel like a junkie who just crawled out of the worst trip of his life. I saw some fucked up shit when that drug had its claws in me, and I swear I don't ever want to go through that again, Ver confessed to Leo, his voice still shaky, as Leo turned his eyes away, unwilling to meet his cousin's gaze, for his own mind was already replaying the visions that had haunted him, each one too raw to speak aloud. Deep down, Leo did not wish to confront those demons either, however, somehow, he knew he had to. No, Ver, I think it's about time we faced our fears. The universe isn't as rosy as our life has been lately. Nor are wars as easy to win as we won Nemo and Coral. I think it's about time we woke up to reality. For if we do nothing about the visions we fear today, then someday they are bound to become a reality. Leo advised with gritted teeth, as he resolved to never let those fears turn into reality. Chapter 684, Training. Planet Tithia, First Elder's private training arena. The days bled into one another, each session no easier than the last, as Leo and Ver supported one another through the endless cycle of cuffs, potions, and illusions, as they slowly learnt how to separate shadow from substance, until their paranoia no longer ruled them, and they began to respond less like cornered beasts and more like sharpened blades. By the 5th day, both could finally stand upright even under the haze, their breathing steadier, their eyes clearer, their minds learning to embrace the instinctive warnings without being swallowed by them. Of course, the false alarms still came, whispers of death that never arrived, but now they could blink once, breathe twice, and decide which ones to trust and which ones to ignore. The First Elder, however, was not satisfied. Paranoia is a child's game, the Elder said, his smile thin as he gestured to the assistant, who laid a fresh pile of blunt daggers at his feet. It is time you learn the difference between illusion and reality. Whoosh! A dagger split the air toward Ver's chest. His instinct screamed at him to move, yet his mind hesitated, remembering the countless hallucinations of flying blades he had dodged these past days, all of them false, as he did not move yet again. There, this one might be real. Leo prompted, but too late, as Ver froze for half a second too long, the dagger slamming into his ribs before bouncing to the ground, leaving him groaning in pain as he staggered back. Wrong, the First Elder said coldly. You hesitated. You questioned. And that means death. Whoosh! Another dagger flashed, this one toward Leo, yet even as he saw it come towards himself, Leo did not move, as he did not see an intent line behind the attack, making him presume that it wasn't real. However, he presumed wrong. Thud! The weapon smacked against his shoulder, the dull ache spreading down his arm as he cursed under his breath. Wrong again, the Elder said, his lips curving upward. Don't try to read into its skyshard, trust your instincts, sharpen them into your most reliable weapon. In the end, information can be faked, but instinct can't. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Daggers came one after another, some whistling harmlessly through the air only to vanish mid-flight, illusions designed to test their nerves, while others struck hard and true, punishing them whenever they chose wrong. Ver snarled, blood running down his lip where he had bitten through it, as he barely twisted aside from a real one, his movements jerky, torn between flinching at phantoms and trusting the faint tug of his gut. Motherfuckers playing mind games, he hissed, his chest heaving, sweat dripping from his temple. How the hell are we supposed to know which is real? You already know, the Elder said. You just refuse to listen. Instinct whispers quietly. Fear shouts. Learn the difference, it's not that hard. Another blade spun toward them, the air hissing with its speed as Leo's muscles tensed, but this time, instead of reacting, he closed his eyes for a split second, listening to the silence within the chaos. Not real. He stood still, and sure enough, the dagger flickered away a foot before reaching him, dissolving into nothing but smoke. Ver saw it too, his eyes widening. It sounds simple enough, but it's bloody hard to override decades of caution drilled into your bones. I can't do it, it doesn't come naturally to me. Ver complained, as the grueling training went on for hours for the duo, the daggers piling on the floor, their bodies battered and bruised from mistakes, yet little by little their movements shifted from frantic guessing to calculated response, their instincts beginning to cut through the storm of illusions. However, it was still not enough, the duo barely guessed correctly 20% of the time, and had a long way to go before they could proudly say that they had mastered the technique. Meanwhile, Raymond's POV. After Morris found out his secret, the Great Deceiver gave him a 150-day time period to sort out his affairs, and formulate a strategy to attack the cult, as he let Caliph train his son on how best to fight a monster like Soren. I can't even predict where the attack is going to come from, for while I can perceive the fourth dimension, I can't manipulate it like Father, Raymond thought, as the hairs on the back of his neck rose in warning, yet his body was already too slow, the blade slicing across his forearm and sending sparks of agony up to his shoulder as he stumbled, his grip on his sword faltering for half a breath too long. Slash, step, crack, The attacks came not as movements but as inevitabilities, Caliph phasing in and out of mirrored fragments of space itself, striking from angles that should not exist, a cut from above that landed from below, a fist from the left that shattered ribs on the right, as although Raymond's instincts screamed at him to move, his body could not adjust to the pace of the battle, as the manipulation of dimensions unraveled every attempt he made at defense. He isn't even fighting seriously, he's toying with me, showing me the difference between perception and control, reminding me that seeing another layer of reality means nothing if I can't bend it to my will, Raymond thought, as he spat blood to the floor and lunged forward with a desperate thrust, only for Caliph's figure to split into three, one stepping back, one sidestepping, and the real one pivoting inside his guard to slam a palm against his chest, the impact detonating like a hammer as he went skidding across the broken ground. Thud. Wheeze. Every bone rattled in his frame as he forced himself up, his knees shaking, his arms burning, his vision doubling and then fracturing into kaleidoscopic shards as the mirrors bled together. I can't track him, every attack feels like it comes from everywhere at once, he hissed under his breath, his blade trembling as his lungs clawed for air, his thoughts racing even faster than his ragged heartbeat. Whoosh! A blade of dimensional force grazed his cheek, the cut shallow but cold, as though space itself had burned him, and Raymond knew that if Caliph had willed it, his head would have rolled to the floor. Instinct without control is like a candle in a storm, Caliph's voice whispered from the walls, the ceiling, the floor, his presence smothering as Raymond spun, searching, striking wildly into illusions that dissolved into smoke and light. Crack! A knee found his ribs, a backfist split his lip, and a kick sent him sprawling once again, his body a ragdoll under the storm of blows. I can perceive the distortion of space. I can see the angles bending, but every time I try to react, he's already 3 moves ahead, already waiting for me in the place I thought was safe, Raymond thought, as frustration and despair mingled into a bitter lump in his throat, his body too slow, his mind too inexperienced, his will the only thing keeping him upright. Step, step. Caliph emerged at last, walking casually from the wall as if strolling out of mist, not a single mark on him, his expression calm and unreadable as Raymond staggered back, blade half raised, chest heaving, face battered and bloodied, his entire frame screaming in pain. You fight like a child who has been handed a weapon he cannot lift, Caliph said, his tone flat as his gaze raked over his son's broken stance. If you cannot even defend against these simple attacks, then you will not last 5 minutes against your uncle, that is for certain. He warned, as Raymond felt his chest sink in despair. If possible, he really did not wish to fight his uncle. However, he had no other choice. If he did not fight his uncle, it would be his own father who would end his life, and hence, all he could do was prepare as best as he could, for the last battle of his life. Chapter 685, A New Passive. Planet Tithia, First Elder's private training arena, 45 days later. 1.5 months passed in the blink of an eye for Leo and Vere, as the duo struggled with paranoia and panic on the daily, until recently when they finally began to overcome it convincingly. Clink, clink. The cuffs still weighed on their wrists every morning, and the potion still burned in their throats every afternoon, yet what once dragged them to the brink of madness now felt like a crucible they could walk through without stumbling, as the hallucinations that used to tear their minds apart no longer seemed to hold any power over them. "'Cause, it's almost funny," Vere said, his lips twitching into a grin as he spun aside from a real dagger that whistled toward him, his body moving without hesitation. "This thing used to make me scream at shadows, now it's like I can feel which ones are smoke and which ones can actually split my ribs." He boasted, as Leo chuckled in response. "There's nothing to celebrate. You still moved too late on 20% of them," Leo reminded, his tone flat as he remained perfectly still while another dagger flashed across the air, vanishing a breath before it could touch him. Unlike Vere, who scrutinized every attack with slight doubt still, Leo's eyes never even narrowed, his breathing never changing, as the faint hum of his instincts guided him with a certainty that left no space for doubt, as though his body had become a vessel that reacted before his mind even tried to calculate. "You're at 80%, while I'm very close to mastery." If you want my advice, the only thing you need to take the final step is to stop second-guessing yourself, for until you stop thinking like a swordsman and start trusting like a beast, you'll always flinch at the wrong time. Leo added, his voice quiet yet cutting. TCH, I'll get there very soon cuz, don't count me out yet. Ver muttered, though his grin held, sweat sliding down his cheek as he steadied himself, clearly unwilling to accept the gap between them even as he knew it was there. Throughout this interaction, the First Elder watched from the sidelines with that same hollow smile of his hands folded behind his back, as his expression gave nothing away except the faint glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. You've both come far, Skyshard more so than you Ver, but I never expected either of you to master this technique in under 2 months, for when I taught this to Noah, it took him 6 months to do the same. So compared to him, you're both monsters in my eyes. The First Elder said, as he suddenly threw a couple daggers across the room, one real and one fake, as just like he expected, Leo did not even flinch at the attack, while Ver shifted his weight just in time to avoid the real one that buried itself in the sand at his feet. You see, the Elder continued, his tone sharp with approval. I threw this attack with the strength of a Grandmaster, and it would have easily impaled any amateur tier warrior. However, you dodged it not with exceptional speed or reflex, but instincts alone, even when your strength is suppressed to the amateur tier. This is proof that while a warrior may wield 100 techniques, if his instincts betray him, he dies before any of them can save him. So understand that what you have forged here is not just a skill, it is survival itself, and survival is the only currency that carries meaning when the universe tries to erase you. The First Elder explained, as Leo closed his eyes briefly, feeling the calm hum of his body responding in harmony with danger. He's right. This technique is a cheat. While it's not useful for offense or defense in particular, it's still invaluable as a passive. Leo thought, as by the time he opened his eyes again, he felt all the lingering effects of the paranoia potion fade away, even though he had drunk it not even a couple minutes ago. Sigh. At the same time, Ver let out a long exhale, dragging the back of his wrist across his brow as he muttered under his breath, guess this means sneaking up on either of us is officially impossible, huh? Not impossible, Leo corrected, his voice stoic as stone, just very unlikely. And with that, the training continued, the daggers flying, the instincts sharpening, as by the end of the day, Leo finally completed his part of the training, and attained mastery in Sixth Sense. The skill now becoming a new passive for him. Meanwhile Raymond, at the same time as Leo and Ver improved, so did Raymond, who after 45 days of battling Caliph, felt his instincts sharpen in a way they never had before, for although his body was still too slow to escape most attacks, and his blade still too heavy to carve openings against his father, at the very least he could finally see the storm descending upon him before it struck. Every strike now came with a ripple in the air, every dimensional distortion folding space just slightly out of alignment before the blow arrived. And though Caliph's speed remained untouchable, Raymond's eyes no longer chased shadows in vain, as they began to track patterns hidden in the chaos. I can see it, the fracture in space, the bend in the angle of his step, the moment before the strike. Raymond thought, as his arm lifted far too late, yet still lifted, his blade catching the edge of Caliph's palm strike and softening the impact, though the force still flung him backwards, his ribs groaning as he hit the floor hard enough to rattle his teeth. Thud. Wheeze. He pushed himself up, his breath ragged, his legs trembling, yet his eyes burned with a light that had not been there at the beginning. Caliph did not relent, his figure bending in and out of mirrored fragments of space, each movement a lesson in inevitability, each strike an echo of mastery Raymond could not yet touch, yet no matter how many times he fell, no matter how many cuts burned across his skin, he rose again, guided not by hope of victory but by the certainty that his instincts were finally awakening. I am still too slow, still too weak, still leagues beneath him, but I can see now. The thought carried him through the pain, as bruises painted his body and his grip shook upon his weapon, yet his battle intent, sharpened day after day under Caliph's merciless hand, stood firmer than ever. I will still most likely not be able to stand my ground against Uncle, However, at least now I'll be able to block an attack or two before dying. I have exactly 100 more days until Morris's deadline to attack the cult, but if I keep improving at this rate, I'll be able to hold Uncle back for at least 10 minutes before he overwhelms me. Raymond thought. As for now, surviving 10 minutes was the only goal he chased. Chapter 686, Mental Peace. Planet Tithia, Argo's private forge, Amanda's POV. Clang, hiss, crackle. The forge burned hot, flames licking against the small metal device placed within the burner, as Amanda worked on tinkering the burning hot device, while Argo stood like an assistant beside her. Easy there, lady, if you strike it too hard it will deform and spin under the tongs. Argo warned, as he held the device steady over the flames with his experienced hands, even when Amanda struck it with a bit too much power. Master Argo, I need to hit it this hard to draw the mana lines inside, can you please hold it a tad bit firmer? Amanda requested, her voice carrying a note of respect, for though she had been entrusted with this project, she never forgot whose forge she stood in or whose guidance made such progress possible. Over the past 60 days, Master Argo had helped her tackle the impossible, as he progressively managed to find solutions to making the mana heart smaller and smaller, until today, where they finally attempted to make a mana heart the size of a pendant. If they succeeded, it would be the final design that Leo desperately wanted made. However, crafting it was undoubtedly a very challenging task. I am holding it firm enough, girl, Argo replied, his voice deep as iron, as he adjusted the angle by a fraction, the glow stabilizing instantly, but the rune alignment is your task, not mine. If the etching falters, it will not matter how steady I hold it. He admonished, as Amanda bit her lip before focusing harder, her chisel sliding with precision as sparks flew, carving the delicate channel across the crystal core until the flow of light hummed evenly through the lines. Click. Pulse. The device shivered, then steadied, a faint azure glow pulsing like a heartbeat, as Amanda finally exhaled in relief, her chest swelling with excitement. It's stable, Master Argo, it's actually holding, Amanda whispered, almost afraid to break the moment, though her voice trembled with joy as her eyes remained fixed on the small pendant-sized device. Whir. FSHH. The elder blacksmith leaned closer, his weathered face catching the reflection of the glow, his sharp eyes scrutinizing every detail of the device before giving a slow nod. It's working as intended, it's drawing in impure mana and pushing out pure one. And the filter deterioration looks slower than we anticipated, for at this pace, the filters will last us 3 full years before burning out, which is much longer than the one you had hoped for. He said, as Amanda's lips curved into a smile, her hands clasping together as she bowed slightly in gratitude. That is only because of your guidance, Master Argo. Without your hand steadying mine, this would have shattered like the last 10 attempts. She shared, as Argo smiled at her remarks. Perhaps it would have, Argo replied, as he set the device down gently on the anvil, his heavy arms folding across his chest. But the persistence was yours, not mine. You are a brilliant blacksmith yourself, Lady Skyshard, never forget that. Amanda shook her head quickly, her eyes glimmering as she gazed at the glowing mana heart pendant that now sat beside the forge. This was it. This was Leo's dream come true. And once they found a way to mass-produce this device, she could finally help him sleep a comfortable night's sleep. We have already found a way to mass-produce the TV-sized purifiers, that purify entire rooms, Master Argo. And our assembly line has already produced more than 10,000 units of those purifiers in the past month alone, for the cost of about 500 megapixels each. However, these pendants are the ones we need to figure out how to mass-produce next. As the engineering on this is much more precision-linked and challenging than the crude TV-sized units. Amanda reminded, as Argo nodded in agreement with her assessment. Currently, their goal was to produce 1 million TV-sized units that could purify entire rooms, and 1 million pendants for personal carrying, as with an emergency arsenal of that size, they could then proceed to roll out the excess for common cult welfare. Once these are spread across the cult, every barracks will have pure mana to breathe, and the quality of our soldiers will improve massively. Perhaps, given enough time, we can finally cover the entire cult lands with these devices. Amanda shared, as she foresaw a future where everyone could benefit from Leo's pure mana heart in the future, as quality of life for all commoners across the cult improved as a result. At the same time, Planet Tithia, the Grand Library, Leo's POV. Since Vare was still busy learning Sixth Sense under the First Elder while he was done, Leo used the spare time he had to research more about time-stilled worlds, and which one specifically was the world housing the soul of the primordial dragon Moltheric, as after completing his paranoia training, he felt like this was the one fail-safe plan he needed to complete, to preserve his own sanity for the future. He had already received the good news that Amanda and Argo were making rapid progress in the mass production of his mana heart, which gave him the peace of mind to now look for which exact spatial crack Moltheric was sealed behind. As to his unexpected joy, he found out that the anomaly where Moltheric was sealed was most likely located at the edge of cult-controlled universe, only a few 100 million miles from Ixtal. If I don't find a way through to becoming demigod traditionally, I'll be sure to pay you a visit very soon, old friend, for I'm sure you managed to ascend to that tier, long before such technicalities existed. Leo mused, as although he hoped he never had to visit such a horrid world again, he was prepared to do it, just in case he had no other choice. Chapter 687, Ghost Protocol. 15 days later, Planet Tithia. Once Leo had gathered all the information he needed about Moltherac's time-stilled world, and had laid his hands on the first batch of handcrafted mana heart pendants, he summoned Chaosbringer to Tithia, to discuss some important business. "What is it, Lord Boss? Why do you look so serious today?" Chaosbringer asked, as he arrived at the restaurant Leo asked him to meet, while being dressed not as the Seventh Elder, but rather as his usual self. "Chaosbringer, what I'm about to tell you today is something that you must treat with both discretion and sincerity, since it's a matter that has been bothering me for a long time." Leo began, as his words instantly made Chaosbringer listen in rapt attention. "When I first joined the cult, I wasn't sure if this place was the right fit for me or not, and hence I kept looking for a way out, in case everything went southwards. However, over time, I've started to like this place, despite its obvious challenges." Leo explained, as he gave Chaosbringer all the context that he could. "Hence, the plan that I initially made as a backup to take my family and run away, is the same plan that I have now, but for the whole cult. Whereby, in case a catastrophic calamity ever falls upon us, I can relocate the majority of the cult to a safe location, where they will be safe from the clutches of the righteous faction." Leo explained, as Chaosbringer's eyes widened in shock at his proposal, for he couldn't even begin to comprehend the logistics behind such a project. To relocate the majority of the cult to a safe location. Was such a feat even possible? Chaosbringer wondered, as Leo continued with his explanation. "I've named it the Ghost Protocol. It's my plan to save the cult and fulfill my duty as its shadow dragon just in case everything goes to hell. However, I'll need your help to make it a reality," Leo said in a heavy tone, as Chaosbringer instantly pushed his hands forward, to clutch Leo's palm across the table. "Whatever you need, Lord Boss, your humble servant is always ready to help you to the best of his abilities," he assured, as Leo nodded slowly in acknowledgement, though the weight of his own words still pressed heavy on his chest. "The task I'm assigning you will require sacrifice from your men. They may suffer significantly trying to make my dream a reality, and hence, it will be tough to convince them to go on such a suicidal path. But I've weighed the pros and cons, and arrived at the conclusion that it must be done," Leo said, as Chaosbringer looked into his eyes with nothing but resolve. "I'm not sure if you're aware of them, but in this universe lay dimensional anomalies called time-stilled worlds. The mana of these worlds is stale and tainted, and hence any sane creature with a working mana circuit that enters these worlds is transformed into a mindless creature driven by nothing but primal instinct. It doesn't matter if you're a monarch or an amateur tier warrior, if you're exposed to the tainted mana long enough, you will be corrupted," Leo said, as Chaosbringer nodded in understanding, though his jaw clenched at the thought of such cursed realms. "This hostile nature of this world's mana is both a boon and a curse for us. On one hand, it's a boon because our enemies suffer the same fate as us, if they chase us into these worlds. And on the other hand, it's a curse for us, because prolonged exposure can turn us insane as well. However, recently, Amanda has developed a device that can help one survive prolonged exposure to tainted mana without turning insane, and it's my desire that we send some of our finest warriors into the time-stilled world, equipped with these devices, so that they can start developing massive cities inside them. Leo shared, as at this moment Chaosbringer's eyes finally sparkled with understanding, for he now realized what his Lord Boss truly intended to build: a second home, hidden in the shadows of time itself. Every day that passes in the outside world is akin to 100 days inside the time-stilled world, and hence the development of these cities can in theory happen at a much faster pace compared to normal. However, sending men in there comes with its own risks. The world is full of dangerous creatures that are nothing like what they are used to fighting here in the normal universe, and there's no saying as to what problems they may face there in terms of finding the resources necessary to start construction, or the weather conditions they might have to face while working. Hence, it's safe to say that this is a very risky project. However, like I already told you before, it's something I feel must be done, Leo emphasized, as Chaosbringer nodded in understanding, his eyes now brimming not with fear but with the same reckless loyalty that had once built their empire back on the Ark ship, as though even the idea of colonizing Hell itself was something he would follow Leo into without hesitation. The final goal I have is to make cluster cities out there that can house as many people as possible. But we don't just need to house them. Naturally, we also need to feed them, provide basic amenities for them and help them live a normal life. And achieving all that will need not only masterful planning and engineering, but also significant sacrifice. Recently, I keep having this gnawing feeling in my chest that the cult may face an unprecedented crisis very soon, and hence, I feel like the sooner we can get this project up and running, the better I will feel, for in the end, if everything goes to hell, that hellish place might be the last bastion the cult can hold on to. Leo expressed, as Chaosbringer gulped nervously after learning about his dream. What Leo wanted to achieve was indeed a tall task that needed a lot of talented people to complete. However, Chaosbringer could see why his lord wanted to do this. And since his lord wanted it done, he was going to try his best to get it done, no matter the cost. Planet Vorthas, Leo's POV. After informing Chaosbringer about the Ghost Protocol and setting the Fallback project into motion under the shroud of secrecy, the last stop Leo made was at his home on Vorthas, where he finally brought Veri to meet his family for the very first time, once the young dragon's grueling training of Sixth Sense had drawn to its conclusion. It had taken Veri 20 extra days beyond Leo to reach the same level of mastery, his stubbornness often colliding with hesitation until instinct finally prevailed, yet in the end he too grasped the essence of Sixth Sense. To their surprise, in recognition of their progress, the First Elder granted them a brief reprieve, a handful of days to breathe as free men, before ordering them to report to the Fifth Elder, where the next chapter of their training arc awaited them. However, for now it did not matter, as Leo introduced Ver to the family, who were all very glad to meet him. You know, you look just like Jacob's brother Paul, the resemblance is almost uncanny. Elena said, as she pulled on the dragon's cheeks as if he were a cute little baby. No, Elena, I told you he looks like Uncle Barry. Just because you didn't see Uncle Barry when he was young, doesn't mean he doesn't look like him. Jacob argued, as Elena glared at him in anger. Oh please, don't compare this handsome young boy to old man Barry. Don't listen to him, Aegon. He's an old man himself now, Elena jabbed, as Ver couldn't help but burst out laughing listening to the couple quarrel. Leo's family was everything he imagined a normal family to be like. The mother was well-loved and charming, the father was old-fashioned and struggling with middle age, the elder brother was protective and caring, the sister-in-law was beautiful and funny, and finally, Leo was the black sheep of the family, but still well-loved by all. Oh, don't be shy, Ver, I know your transcendent body can handle more than just a couple bottles of beer. Drink up. Don't you know it's a crime to get through family dinners sober? Luke teased, as he opened a couple more bottles of beer before Ver, as he did not let him protest in the slightest. Chatter. Plus laughter. Cutlery noises. The atmosphere around the dinner table was hearty and live. However, despite the pleasant mood, Leo seldom smiled, as he knew that he would have to ruin this merry atmosphere pretty soon. "What's up with you today? Why are you not saying much? Is it because Amanda isn't here?" Alia asked Leo, who shook his head in denial, before coughing loudly to gather the attention of everyone on the table. Plus cough. "I apologize for broaching this topic on the dinner table. But since everyone but Amanda is here, and since I have already talked to her about this in private, I think it's about time I told you about the Ghost Protocol as well." Leo began, as Luke, Jacob, and Ver raised their eyebrows at once. "The Ghost Protocol is something I've been working on with Amanda for a while now. And it's our doomsday plan for survival, should everything ever go to hell. So if the righteous faction ever kills Surin, and there's no hope for the cult's future, or if we ever become wanted fugitives both inside the cult and the righteous faction, it's like a pocket of safe space where we can survive and thrive still." Leo explained, as Ver raised his hand in protest, as if to say, "Why would you ever be wanted inside the cult?" But Leo pushed his hand down before he could say a single word. "If I ever tell you guys, activate Ghost Protocol, you must all run downstairs to the basement and open a box I've labeled as Doomsday Kit. Inside is a pendant, a supply storage ring, and some other essentials for each and every one of you, which you must put on, and rush to the hangar bay area, where a private jet will be waiting for you to take you to a pocket of space called a time-stilled world. Of course it's my hope that such a scenario never comes to pass. However, just in case it does. Just in case we ever need to run. This is how we ensure survival." Leo shared, as his serious words and tone immediately dampened the lively atmosphere. "Leo, what is it, brother? Why are you planning doomsday scenarios all of a sudden?" Luke asked, as he wondered if there was a particular scenario Leo was afraid of that could come to pass in the near future. However, Leo simply shook his head in denial. For he knew that his concerns were not born out of paranoia, but were rather rooted in reality. "I'm not strong enough," Leo replied, as he clenched his fists hard and bowed his head. "The stronger I become, the further the summit of power seems. And the fact of the matter is that the current me is not strong enough, but our enemies are. If things go southwards, I'm not strong enough to ensure the protection of this family, and hence I must come up with contingency measures to keep you safe. And this is the best one I could come up with," he explained, as he lifted his head up, and looked each of his family members in their eyes. "I don't want you to be punished just because you're the family of the Shadow Dragon. I don't want you to be punished, just because you carry the blood of the timeless assassin inside of you, just like I do. And hence, I'm doing what I can to keep you safe, until the day when I'm strong enough that we have to fear no one." Leo concluded, as everyone around the table let out a heavy sigh, as they empathized with the burden Leo carried on his shoulders. Despite being the youngest member of the family, he had taken up the mantle of its protection, and everyone greatly appreciated his efforts for the same. XXXXXK. End of Volume 6. More chapters in Buyers Club for TMT. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.